Bernie Sanders is making a campaign stop in a college town tomorrow, and it's San Diego. Why the youngest voters are embracing the oldest candidate. One of the last vestiges of the Cold War crumbles today as the leaders of the U.S. and Cuba meet for the first time in nearly 9 decades. And from our Fronteras desk, some multiracial students are choosing a new name for themselves. This is Evening Edition on KPBS. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Supporters of Senator Bernie Sanders are preparing to greet the candidate a day ahead of a rally planned for San Diego. KPBS reporter Steve Walsh has the story.
Sanders supporters are not counting him out. The rally at the convention center filled the 10,000 spots before Monday afternoon. I talked with Michael Johnson, who is the president of the San Diego Progressive Democratic Club.
Bernie has a following, not just in San Diego, but wherever you find college kids, young kids, that the millennials especially, because this is bottom line, this is their century.
Johnson and other Sanders supporters want him to remain in the race through the June primary, especially because of his support among younger voters.
This is their century, and they have to come on board. They have to pay attention to politics, because if this turns to crap, they got to live in a lot longer than I do.
This is Sanders' first public appearance in San Diego since his campaign began. The candidate is scheduled to go on stage at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Doors open at 5 o'clock, but Sanders' activities will begin hours before that. A rally is planned at the concourse next to City Hall at 10:30 in the morning. Supporters then plan to walk to the convention center. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
President Obama is declaring today a new day in relations between the United States and Cuba. The president stood alongside Cuban President Raul Castro in a history-making meeting in Havana. Officials say the president's visit is an attempt to normalize relations between both countries. President Castro urged President Obama to lift the long-standing U.S. embargo.
El bloqueo es el obstáculo.
The blockade stands as the most important obstacle to our economic development and the well-being of the Cuban people. That's why its removal will be of the essence to normalize bilateral relations.
President Obama also called for greater human rights and democracy in Cuba. It is a U.S. president's first visit to the country in nearly 9 decades. California's 2 senators are calling for nonstop flights from this state to Cuba. Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein say Los Angeles has the nation's 4th largest Cuban-American population and needs service to Havana. An agreement between the U.S. and Cuba allows for up to 110 flights a day. The Department of Transportation is now considering possible routes. Federal authorities say they may not need Apple's help to unlock an iPhone belonging to one of the San Bernardino shooters. The word comes a day before a scheduled court hearing in the matter. It's been canceled. The FBI has been trying to get Apple to unlock the phone, believing it could have evidence in the case. But now federal lawyers say an outside party came forward over the weekend and showed agents a possible method for unlocking the phone. The U.S. military is investigating a rocket attack that killed a Marine from Temecula over the weekend. The Pentagon says Staff Sergeant Louis Cardin was assigned to a unit at a small outpost in northern Iraq, providing protection for U.S. advisors at an Iraqi military base. Cardin was based at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. He was 27. San Diego-based troops have spent the past several weeks taking part in an international amphibious exercise along the South Korean coast. The show of force was carried out amid heightened tensions with North Korea. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy talked to a commander from Camp Pendleton as his unit was wrapping up its part of the mission.
Thousands of San Diego-based Marines and sailors have been storming beaches, testing explosives and practicing amphibious landings. Colonel Anthony Henderson is commander of the Camp Pendleton-based 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit. He says North Korea's tests and threats did not interfere with their training.
We trained in how to do amphibious operations, landing amphibious assault vehicles ashore, and we did that onto the Korean coastline. as well as flying our Ospreys in a unique opportunity where we lifted Republic of Korea Marines from a Republic of Korea Navy ship to do an amphibious operation ashore.
The exercise, called Sang-Young, Korean for Twin Dragon, was the largest the force had ever taken part in. The Camp Pendleton unit departed San Diego last month with the Boxer Amphibious Ready Group. The ground combat troops, helicopter squadrons, and assault aircraft teams are working together on various missions, including disaster relief and embassy and security exercises. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
The U.S. Supreme Court says it won't consider two legal challenges to Colorado's marijuana law. The challenges were filed by Oklahoma and Nebraska. The two states were trying to get Colorado's legalization declared unconstitutional. A federal bankruptcy court has approved the sale of the Orange County Register and Press Enterprise newspapers. The sale was to Digital First Media, the parent company of the Los Angeles Daily News. It was for $52.3 million. Tribune Publishing Company, which owns UT San Diego and the Los Angeles Times, also put in a bid of a higher amount, but that purchase was blocked due to an antitrust lawsuit filed by the U.S. Department of Justice. Last year, the agency in charge of protecting California workers slapped more than 80 employers with major penalties for safety violations. 9 of those penalties were levied against employers in San Diego County. Reporter Chris Young joins us to discuss these workplace safety violations as part of News in Numbers, a new series from KPBS media partner iNewsSource that finds stories about San Diego in the realm of public data. Chris, thanks for joining me. Why don't we start by talking a little bit about this data?
Sure. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, better known as OSHA, keeps a database of workplace safety inspections that result in penalties totaling $40,000 or more. Now, most of these inspections are prompted by accidents in the workplace, but other times they're prompted by complaints filed by workers. Last year, inspectors fined California employers more than $5.6 million for the most serious safety violations.
What are we talking here? How serious are these violations?
These are safety violations that inspectors consider to be so dangerous that they could result in workers being seriously injured or even killed on the job. And in at least 3 cases last year, workers were actually killed on the job.
Well, can you give us an example of a local violation?
Sure. So after an accident last year, state inspectors handed San Diego Gas and Electric a $70,000 fine. Now, that's the highest possible penalty per citation. That happened after an employee working in Mission Valley fell through plywood boards that were covering an underground vault. He ended up falling 7 feet into this concrete vault and breaking 8 ribs. Now, inspectors gave SDG&E what's called a willful citation, and that's because the utility company knew that the plywood boards needed to be replaced 5 years before the accident. SDG&E has since appealed these citations.
How common is it for a company to appeal?
They're actually really common. In many cases, companies that file appeals end up getting their fines reduced significantly. But even if companies paid the maximum penalties, some workplace safety advocates say they're not high enough. I spoke with Jessica Martinez. She's based here in San Diego, and she's the acting executive director of the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health.
Although the penalties might seem high when you hear 40,000, et cetera, they're relatively very low when we're talking about, someone has lost a life or a limb. It is really just pocket change for a lot of these employers.
So, Chris, which company received the highest fine last year?
It's actually a household name, ExxonMobil.
Okay. So
the state inspectors hit the company with a $500,000 in fines last year after an explosion at a refinery in Los Angeles County. It ended up injuring 4 workers, and Exxon received 19 total citations for that, but they've appealed all of them.
Okay, now to see a searchable database of the violations, you can visit iNewsSource.org. iNewsSource reporter Chris Young, thank you so much.
Thank you.
An automated system that was supposed to help digitize the U.S. government's immigration paperwork may be doing more harm than good. Auditors say the faulty system has been sending green cards to the wrong addresses. Investigators with the Inspector General found that U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services is behind schedule to automate their paperwork. Experts say that may cost taxpayers an additional $1 billion. The Department of Homeland Security is cracking down on young immigrants living in the U.S. illegally. Associated Press reporter Alex Sands says in the last couple of years, thousands of minors have been separated from their families in the U.S. to be sent back to their country of origin.
By the summer of 2014, thousands of children had illegally crossed the U.S.-Mexico border, often alone. Wilden Acosta was one of them. At 17, he fled Honduras, fearful of street gangs, to join his parents in Durham, North Carolina. He quickly adjusted. A high school senior who played soccer, he had plans to go to college. This January, federal agents arrested him outside his parents' home.
There are a lot of students here. We're immigrants. This separates us from our families. If I go back, they'll kill me. I'm scared. I don't want to go back.
Acosta is now 19. He awaits deportation at the Stewart Detention Center in Georgia, caught up in the government's stepped-up efforts to crack down on illegal border crossings.
The journey here is not safe. And if you come here, we will send you back. And that's what we've been doing consistently.
Since 2014, more than 10,000 children who came to the U.S. without their parents have been ordered out of the country, many after turning 18.
The administration is sort of in a tough spot. The administration has set priorities for deportation, and their mantra is felons, not families. But in truth, they've started to deport Central American families that include children only because they came recently. So there's really an inconsistency there.
The arrests have angered immigration advocates. They say it's dangerous to send the young migrants back. In Durham, North Carolina, the city council recently called for an end to the deportations.
This impacts the quality of life in the city. We have a lot of Hispanic students now who are afraid to go to school, and I believe firmly that people who are coming here to make a better life are contributing to the United States.
Acosta's parents are hopeful, but resigned.
Más triste.
If he returns to Honduras, I'll be very sad knowing the gangs are there. They'll go after him. They'll kill him.
A family again torn apart. A young man facing a dreaded journey. Alex Sands, The Associated Press, Lumpkin, Georgia.
America's top border official says working with Central American governments is an important way to stem the flow of migrants from that region.
Improving safety, security, the economy, educational levels in those countries would be absolutely as important as any additional border security.
And that's an excerpt from an exclusive interview given to KPBS by Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Gil Kurlikowski. You can see more of our interview with the commissioner online at kpbs.org. In his continued push to bring infrastructure improvements to San Diego neighborhoods, Mayor Kevin Faulconer today joined city council members at the Valencia Park Malcolm X Library to push for $7.6 million in federal grants. The money will be spent on upgrades at neighborhood recreation centers, a library, and a new teen technology center with new computers and a recording studio.
This means teens will develop technological skills in areas such as graphic design and media production. I'm so confident that skills learned in this teen center at this great library will be used by our youth to change the future of technology.
And shortly after Mayor Faulconer took office, he won City Council approval to redirect a larger portion of community development grant funds toward infrastructure. The City Council will vote tomorrow on spending the funds for neighborhood upgrades for the 2017 fiscal year. A growing number of Americans are multiracial. Some who are both African American and Mexican American are defying racial categories. From our Fronteras partner Cronkite News, reporter Clara Benitez shows us many identify as Blaxican.
Raynetta Brown knows how it feels to straddle two worlds.
I was more Mexican when the time was right, and more Black when the time was right. I get identified as Black first. I think people see that from me before being Mexican.
But the ASU student identifies with both groups. Her mother is Mexican American and her father is African American. According to a recent report from Pew Research Center, 6.9% of Americans are multiracial, and the number is rapidly growing.
This idea of a one-drop rule, so having one drop of African blood makes you black regardless of what other part you are, right? Whether you're white, Mexican, or whatnot.
Just like you could see us, the two black sheep in the family, and my mom's whole side of the family, they're all fair-skinned, and it's not, I don't think it was something that was ever like addressed or pointed out to me, but it's something that I noticed as I started to explore like what race is or what my identity was. So I thought that was interesting. And then going to my dad's side would be the opposite, where we'd be like the two lighter ones.
Brown also struggled with her looks at school.
Being made fun of in kindergarten because my hair was in braids and nobody else's was, and so like my hair was different. I was like called Medusa and ridiculous names that I didn't know kids knew.
For years, Brown felt forced to choose a race.
To like fill in a Scantron and determine like which pick one race or pick other.
Now she and others are defying categories. The Instagram account Blaxicans of LA has gone viral. It's the work of a graduate student at Stanford University.
I feel proud to be like part of this new wave of kids who are growing up experiencing completely different cultures within their own family.
It's an experience shared by more and more families. The number of multiracial Americans is growing 3 times as fast as the general population. In Phoenix, Claire Benitez, Cronkite News.
As the host of Public Radio International's The World, Marco Werman has traveled the globe reporting on stories from the obscure to the heavily discussed. Today he joined me in the KPBS studios to talk about the world's special coverage of the critical issues surrounding immigration. Marco, for a special Global Nation episode, you broadcast The World from San Diego, covering elements of life along the U.S.-Mexico border, but you went one step further. You didn't just actually cross the border, but you drove alongside it. What is something that really surprised you with your firsthand account?
I mean, the first thing is you drive through the fence. You get into this no man's land. The fence opens up and you go in there, and there's this kind of space that the U.S. and Mexico share. To physically be there, that in itself was surprising, that you're in this kind of no man's land. That's what they call it. The fence itself, it's 15 feet high. It seemed higher. I don't know why. Maybe that's because of the concertina wire on the top. And then just all the little illustrations of how that fence is being challenged. So this tunnel that ran some 400 yards beneath us where we were in the no man's land, coming out the other side into a factory where smugglers used it. The patches in the fence, and it's the steel mesh fence, so they're coming over the smugglers are coming over from Mexico with tools like a Sawzall that they get at Home Depot and are cutting these slots in it, and the Border Patrol is playing kind of catch up to repair these holes. So all of this kind of visualization of what this fence wall means was kind of surprising. But then, you get down to the ocean and that Friendship Park where you have little kind of Mexican kids on the other side playing in the ocean. And then every Sunday there's this kind of meeting of families between the fence. And once you see that and you experience the act of talking to people on the other side of the fence, you really feel like you're in a prison. That concertina wire suddenly means something else. And you wonder, is this really the best way to kind of separate countries, because it has so many other consequences? So it was eye-opening in many ways.
Immigration is not a new subject, but with this being a presidential election year, the rhetoric has been somewhat agitated. Is this the reason why you wanted to cover this on a personal and professional level?
I mean, on a professional level, we knew that immigration was going to be a hot-button topic this year, and it has been. I think it's semi-coincided with just wanting to be down here in San Diego and do some work out of KPBS. And the story, I think, was obvious, that we're so close to the border. Let's see what we can do about this kind of cross-fertilization between the U.S. and Mexico and what all of that means, including immigration. The fact that there's been so much strident rhetoric around immigration made it more relevant, for sure. I mean, at a personal level, My mother came to the U.S. from the Netherlands and Indonesia when she was just 16 to go to finishing school in Missouri. So these issues are very close to my heart as well. So it was important for me to be at a place on the border and see where this activity is really kind of thickest.
Mm-hmm. And so PRI's The World, it offers listeners more than just a glimpse into other worlds, but really it brings many things to the forefront of American minds. What are some of the tools you use as a host, as a producer, to get those issues across?
We kind of found out a while ago that talking to smart pundits about what's going on around the world is useful for kind of understanding, but you need to kind of really sit in and listen carefully. And over time, it was a human story that really attracted listeners' attention. And if we're trying to make the world more accessible to American listeners, then let's tell more of those stories. And so I think that's really the key, is less analysis, more storytelling from people who are affected by what's going on in the news all over the world. And I think that's probably the most important tool we've got.
Marco Werman, host of PRI's The World, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome.
And KPBS is hosting a community conversation tonight with PRI's The World to discuss immigration and education in San Diego. It starts at 7 here at the KPBS studios. Federal water officials are reviewing Central Valley water management costs for the first time in 40 years. The Central Valley project supplies water to farmers and residents from Northern California. Experts will determine project costs and look at how to best distribute those costs.
The project is operating differently than it did in 1970. So we're relooking at the operations and the project benefits, and so that's what a final cost allocation is.
And results from the review could come by the end of the year. There's a high surf advisory for our coast from 10 tonight until Wednesday afternoon. Steph Davis has a look at our forecast.
Happy Monday, everyone. Well, parts of California are dealing with some wet weather. We do have a Pacific storm system that's bringing some rain to parts of northern and central California. You'll notice these yellows on our radar indicating locally heavy bands of rain. Now, the farther south you go across Southern California, just some low clouds building in, though largely dry conditions. And taking a closer look around home, that's what we can expect for the San Diego area. Quiet and dry tonight, though low clouds building in. Now, the National Weather Service has issued a high surf advisory from tonight throughout your Wednesday afternoon. So if you're heading to the beaches, just want to exercise caution out there and do watch for that high surf. Tonight in Borrego Springs will fall to a low of 57 degrees, cloudy and quiet in Mountain Laguna as lows tumble back to the upper 30s. Upper 40s tonight in Ramona and Alpine, 52 and cloudy in Oceanside, quiet and mild in San Diego itself with an overnight low of 60 degrees. Now the wet weather will continue to creep south towards the southern parts of California Tuesday, but the San Diego area will remain dry. Now parts of the region, especially along the coast, will see low clouds and fog, but still not too bad of a forecast out there. Again, largely dry conditions for your Tuesday across the San Diego area. Here's a look at your 5-day outlook for the coast. Like I mentioned, for your Tuesday, low clouds and fog forming with a daytime high of 66 degrees. Fog will break for sunshine on Wednesday with highs in the low 70s. Partly sunny Thursday and Friday at the coast with highs in the low 70s. Partial sunshine as we look ahead to the weekend. Your high for Saturday, 70 degrees. Inland, plenty of sunshine to be had. The forecast looks beautiful over the next several days. Mid-60s Tuesday, temps rebound Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday back into the 70s, right around 70 degrees for inland for your Saturday. 5-day outlook for the mountains looks like this. We do have plenty of sun over the next couple of days. Temperatures also climbing as well. We'll start things off Tuesday in the 40s. Back to the 50s we go Wednesday, and then for the second half of the work week and the first half of the weekend across the mountains, temperatures will climb into the 60s. Wrapping things up with your 5-day outlook for the deserts. Sunny and warm Tuesday and Wednesday as temperatures climb to the upper 70s. 83 is your high for Thursday and will remain in the 80s Friday and into the day on Saturday. Going to be sunny and very mild as we kick off the weekend. Steph Davis, KPBS News.
Apple is hoping consumers will be tempted by a slimmed-down new iPad Pro. Its screen is a bit smaller than the previous model, and the company says it's got a better processor and camera. It sells for $599. Apple also introduced a new iPhone with a smaller screen that's easier to fit in your pocket. And today is Twitter's 10th birthday. What started as a microblogging site has become one of the internet's most influential means of communication, where a simple 140-character message from a politician can stir up big news stories. You can follow us on Twitter at KPBS Evening. Court is in session. The San Diego State men's basketball team is hosting the second round of the National Invitation Tournament, or NIT, tonight at Viejas Arena on campus. After winning last week, the second-seeded Aztecs will face the Washington Huskies tonight at 8:30. Tonight's winner will advance to the semifinals in Madison Square Garden on March 29th. And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. San Diego is home to one of the country's first AIDS hospices, but that house's future is in doubt as the city council considers selling the property. Hear why on Morning Edition. And then at noon on KPBS Midday Edition, the world's largest international conference on technology and people with disabilities gets underway in San Diego this week. We'll learn about the latest in assistive technologies. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening. Good night.